I guess we have to come back. See, can the hand cause us to sin?
I don't think that Jesus could have explained it any clearer without using these vivid pictures, because I think it could be understood that it's better to lose something of the physical world than to lose your spiritual life. But when he starts talking about your body parts, you realize that it's not just small things that you give up, you know, smoking or alcohol, the major sins. It's not those specifically denoted physical sins. It could be, even though, I don't know, it could be endearing things, close things.
You mean an automobile? Could be a person?
Anything that would be...
A person? A habit?
Anything,
see, I'd say even...
anything that would be difficult, something that you take to your own. If it was an automobile and you happen to love it, you know, if it could be your wife or your child, that's flesh. I mean, sin is not exactly what the world denounces as sin. Sin's anything that keeps you away from the spiritual reality or your spiritual reality.
See, now, I mean, maybe just to take that point even a little farther from the text, I'd say even something that is endearing to you could go as far as your life. Okay, physical, or just the way you perceive of your life. Either one, just as important, because he's saying these people want to live a life of what they define as greatness. Now, what they're talking about is going to lead to causing other people to sin, okay, and therefore to lose their physical lives. Now, to me, it would be better to give up that life of greatness, which to me is, I mean, it's not a trivial thing. It's very important. It's how I define my whole life. To give that up and suffer the anguish and pain and you know, the sense of lack of direction or whatever, it would be much better to do that, according to Jesus, apparently, because the result of hanging on to that greatness, or just your own life in order to not serve someone else, would be worse than fire. It would be hell.
Right.
You know.
Well, it's like a whole illustration of what he's talked about on page 20 of you have to lose your life to gain your life, and here it's just kind of put into terms that you can that are very graspable and very vivid, very striking. You know. Kind of, it's not just casual action; it's really dramatic action that needs to be taken.
Have salt in yourselves, and then what's the result of that? And
be at peace with one another.
How do we get from judging ourselves to being at peace with one another?
They were talking about being the greatest, and therefore they were judging each other.
Oh, thank you. So you go clear back. That act of who is the greatest is an act of judgment, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
And if their judgment is correct, it has not lost its saltiness, then they'll be at peace with each other, because they won't be saying, "Well, I'm better than you."
Okay.
They'll be making the correct assessment of themselves.
Correct assessment of themselves. They will judge themselves, right? And if you judge yourselves, what happens when you cut off your hand?
You don't have a hand.
And you know that it hurts, and you're not going to do that unnecessarily or again. Okay? So if you are going to understand what justice is about, you begin by judging who? Yourself. And if you know how to judge yourself, and will do that radically if necessary, you are then in a position of being able to live at peace with one another, because your judgment will be just and a corrective rather than a destructive implement that God will use. You leave it for something greater. Where do we have that in the text?
Oh, marriage here.
Marriage. Oh, yeah. So what's the marriage passage in there for?
It's kind of giving another image of leaving one
Oh.
thing and cleaving to something else. That's for a greater purpose.
Oh, so for this reason. What reason?
For the reason of becoming complete.
of becoming complete.
For the fact that God, well, actually, for the fact that God made them male and female. So, I mean, you need to define complete a little bit more there, and that's in the fact that God made it so that it could be so well blessed.
All right.
Okay.
So God has taken the initiative, He's created it this way, but in order to realize the blessing of what God has done, there must be a leaving in order to be a cleaving. And so Jesus is asking this man with great possessions to enter into, well, what shall we say here? See, we don't know quite what to say. Marriage, yes.
Life.
Inheritance,
Life in the
life,
text.
Kingdom of God.
kingdom.
Enter into a family relationship, basically.
Yeah, enter into a new relationship.
Yeah.
So,
Inheritance, even.
see, and it's obvious that when we come down this, for my sake in the gospel, he's leaving it for whose sake? For Jesus' sake. What does a husband do?
Leaves the parents, his parents, for the sake of being with the wife.
With the wife, of a new union. So you leave for what reason?
To be unified with something.
For my sake in the gospel. It's interesting. Truly I say to you, whoever, now there's the universal statement, does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it. In one sense, to become a child is to be born into a new life, is to enter into a new type of life. And I think that's what Jesus is calling. Why does he call his disciples children? They are in the process of entering into a new type of life, a new existence, a new relationship. But how can that happen? How can you be an adult and yet be a child?
That's what Nicodemus asked.
Well,
that's
well,
right.
he says like a child.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
So
it's still a
therefore,
question.
I mean, it's pulling on the characteristics of the child that's the most
Okay.
important, which seems, what Lisa was saying, is to be the dependent child. It seems to be
Okay.
an important characteristic
But
there.
the process is you leave
Yes.
in order to be cleave and to be joined to, and the two shall become one. Now that two becoming one,
That's new.
that's something new, isn't it? But on one hand, you look at two people, you and your wife, and you're two, right? But what does the word say?
It says you're one.
The word says you're one.
That
So
makes,
are you,
that makes you a new creation, doesn't
that's a new creature, a new creation. And that's what's being taught here, isn't it? And you shall be united, be joined with, and who brings you together?
God.
God does.
it? Yes.
That's what happens in marriage. But isn't that what happens in what we would call salvation? And who can be saved? With men it's impossible, but not with God. God can take and join us with who? Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it?
Himself and the family. isn't
Well,
he?
yes, himself.
And him who sent him?
And part of that is for my sake and the gospel. Somehow there is a joining with Jesus. Come and follow me. Be joined with me. So that in that sense, we are here seeing that we can be joined and united with Christ in a union that makes us new creatures, new persons. And I think it's being taught here. Now, it may not be taught in the same words that Paul uses in his writings and is used elsewhere, but the concepts are all right here as Jesus teaches it. And it's all about entering life, entering the kingdom, moving in this way, which is certainly, I see it as the overarching theme that brings all of this together.